Welcome to the Keeping the Nostalgia Live Show. I'm your host, Billy Powell. Today is part two with 1989 Trester Award and Indiana Mr. Basketball Award winner, Pat Graham. Pat, thanks so much for spending another hour with us on the program. Tell us about your Evansville Harrison basketball team.
Well, it's funny you bring that up. We won sectional this past weekend. I guess you'd probably say we were favored, but that doesn't mean a whole hell of a lot in sectional time. And beat Castle and beat Jasper, and so now we're on this to regional Saturday, and we're playing Jeffersonville, my old nemesis from high school. But kind of the cool thing is Sharon Wilkerson is the head coach at Jeffersonville. So we had actually, Sharon and I have talked quite a bit over the years, and he we played earlier this year and at the Bossy at a Bossy Classic. Different local teams, different outside of Evansville teams play, and Harrison played Jeffersonville, and both big guys got in foul trouble, and they beat us by a couple. Hell of a game, good game. And then we were kind of hoping that we got a chance to play each other in regional, which meant we both had success. So it's here, and we're kind of getting ready for that. And I have not talked to Sharon yet. It's kind of the same thing as last time. It's I want to reach out, but then you can't, it's kind of the cardinal rule. You don't talk before the game type thing. So we had texted before the game of sectional, and I probably today will reach out and jab him a little bit in some way, shape, or form.
Where are you guys playing at?
We are out Southridge. It's kind of weird now. It's so different compared to the way it used to be, where you basically knew every game you were going to play and where you're going to play and all that stuff. So I guess now it's after sectional, then they decide where you're going to be put, because the other game at Southridge is Bossy and Southridge, because they're a host, so they get a home game, and so Bossy has to go there. And I guess we could have went to Lagodi or Washington, Southridge, or Seymour, and I didn't particularly want to go. I wanted to go to Seymour just because probably my all-time favorite gym in the state of Indiana, but Jeff had already played there 3 times, so I was kind of like, yeah, it's probably not. That's probably advantage them. So I'm like, hopefully we go somewhere else, and we ended up being at Southridge. So they announced those after the sectional. So when they know the matchups, then I guess they determine where regionals are, and it's a one game regional. It's not a 2-game or 3-game regional where morning winners playing the championship. It goes back to just one game. So Bossy and Southridge are 3A, we're 4A. We win the regional, and then there's you got to win 2 games at semi-state to advance to state. So it's just, again, let's not get back on the horse of class basketball, but it's different than it even was last year, because last year there was 3 total games at regional. Now it's 3 total games at semi-state, 1 game at regional, which it's again different.
Pat, is this for fun or for your passion, or do you have like head coaching aspirations in Indiana high school basketball?
No, I have no desire, zero desire to be a head coach. I'm probably like a number of guys. Basketball was such a huge part of my life growing up, and hell, when I graduated and got done playing at IU, I kind of looked around like, I don't even know what to do now, because again, your whole job and your whole life was based on basketball, which, there's goods and bads of that, but it just was what it was. And so the coaching thing, there were some opportunities with coaching and in college, and Coach Dockage, it kind of helped me a little bit with that stuff. And it just wasn't what I wanted to do. I had an opportunity to go to Tennessee with Kevin O'Neill, and here we go with it, just start figuring out on angles. But Coach Dockich had set me up with Coach O'Neill, and I talked to Coach O'Neill down there at Tennessee, and I think it was 13,000 in grad school. And which, graduate assistant or working your way up at University of Tennessee, not a bad gig. And so I kind of made the question. I said, if I don't go to grad school, how much can my, salary go up? And he said 13,000. And I was like, oh. And so then he said, well, I'll pay you off camp and stuff like this. And I just thought, man, is this really what I want? And so I decided not to. And I'm really glad I didn't. I think I'd have enjoyed it, but college coaches, people don't comprehend the hours you spend away from your home, the hours you spend away from your family. Then when you have kids, it's even worse. I'm not saying that's not awesome for some. It just wasn't quite what I wanted to do. And then, when I moved to Evansville and went to work for Pfizer Pharmaceuticals as a drug rep, and I had kids, and I started going to high school games and meeting people. And then I met guys at Harrison. Brian Spear, who's an assistant coach now, but was the head coach there for a long time, and just got to know guys. And then you get asked to do some certain things, and that's when I got into coaching. And I figured out, I really enjoy this, and I've always enjoyed working with young kids, and kind of it kind of helps me with my itch, I guess you want to call it. And so I did it for years at Evansville Memorial, and then the last couple of years at Evansville Harrison. And good, the, again, coach talk, but the kids make it. So if you got a good group of kids and you're around good coaches, the other assistants and head coach who are all good friends of mine, and we all get along really well, and there's no egos. It's just fun. And again, it kind of scratches the itch you have of the game, and it's competitive, and all that good stuff. And hopefully I give a little bit back to what, some guys took care of me back in the day and helped me grow and learn as a player.
You mentioned Coach Dockich a couple times in the previous interview and today. What do you have a relationship with Dan, and what kind of did he mean to you during your college career?
Well, yes. I saw him years ago up at a baseball tournament up in Indy, and occasionally we'll chat on text or whatever, but not a ton. But I know Coach Dockich is kind of a lightning rod for so many IU fans, and really I shouldn't say just IU fans. I'm saying college basketball fans for that matter. And I know he's got his new gig with Outkick, and I know he's up in Indianapolis again. And but I don't know. I know he's a lightning rod, but sometimes it's kind of like a coach. You say, don't listen to how he says it, listen to what he says. He says a lot of good stuff. Now his way of saying it makes so many, he makes IU fans happy and pisses Kentucky off and pisses Ohio State off and makes Iowa happy. I mean, I get that, but he just has a lot of information, and he was always really good to me. I think we all had Coach Felling, Coach Dockich, and Coach Ellenberger at IU. We all had, I guess you call it our guy. Like Coach Dockich is the one that I probably was closer to. Not that Coach Felling or Coach Ellenberger, there was nothing wrong with that relationship. It was just Coach Dockich. I had a little bit special. I could go to him easier than the others, and everyone had their guy. Like it wasn't like Dockich was this group or the guards or whatever. No, it just Dan and I kind of clicked early on, and Dan was hard. Dan was very tough. We had some battles, but on the flip side, I knew Dan was going to be honest with me, and I just always, I don't know, something clicked with him, and so I've always had a good feeling about him. And I get killed all the time. Do you like Dockich? And I'm like, yeah. I mean, again, if you're where I'm from, yeah, I do. I have zero problems with him, and I know his way of doing things is maybe a little different than others, and his opinions and all that stuff. But yeah, he can rile them up real quick. I know recently he's fired everybody up, but I'm like, look, he's got a radio and his podcast and everything, and teach their own. I'm not going to tell anybody what they should and shouldn't say.
Did you watch the boys play Maryland the other day?
I didn't. We were dealing with sectionals, so I did not get to, but I had heard, and we were doing a lot of film work and everything. So I did catch clips, I guess I should say, and I'll be honest with you, they're down early. I knew that, and then when someone said they won, I went back and watched a little bit of it, and that's tough. I mean, that's not easy to do. Now I think Maryland's in a kind of a little bit of a dumpster fire themselves, so I don't really know what that quite means. I think going on the road to Minnesota is going to be something, and then Michigan State, obviously. I don't know what you save out of this season. I think most everyone thinks that this season's over, and I know coach talk is you gotta grow something or momentum. I don't know what you get out of the rest of the season. We thankfully we never had to deal, or the teams that I played on never had to deal with this type of thing. So I really can't answer that. We've never been in this position to where we're kind of like we know, unless of course we didn't have the Big Ten tournament, unless they make a run in the Big Ten tournament, win that, they're not going to the NCAA tournament. So I don't really know I don't know the mentality of that. I really don't. I can probably speculate, but really I'm probably not very good at that either.
Do you think that if somehow, some way they win the last two games of the season, win a couple games of the Big Ten tournament, and they do make the tournament, do you think Hoosier Nation is happy?
Oh, at the exact moment it happens, absolutely, 100%. Everybody be ecstatic. Winning takes care of everything. But the way the season went, and the potholes and um the 20-point losses and stuff like that, I think really's put a bad taste in everyone's mouth. And I understand that. I mean, again, I'm a fan now. Yeah, I'm a former player, but I mean, I'm a fan. I root and watch and support as much as I can. And so it's been frustrating, I guess, is what I say. And again, I think I know on the first go around we did this, I spoke about it's not the loss, it's maybe the way you lose. And I've always said there's a good you can shoot a basketball and there's a good miss and there's a good loss and there's a bad, I know Coach Knight would always say, what's a bad loss? It's, but you're not going to win every game. And there's a way of losing, and you can play well and lose. You can play well for sure on the road and lose. But, 20-point losses and this stuff was just the one where you kind of go, are they playing hard enough? Are they, giving it in? Are they giving up? And, that stuff comes into people's mind. So I think, yes, if all that would happen, I think people would be ecstatic because you live to play another game. And that's kind of what March is. But this season, I think a lot of people have to step back and take a look at it and say, is this what we should have done, or did we do everything and all that stuff? Which everyone should. I mean, hell, Coach Knight did that after every season we had. After it ended, you have to rethink everything. Everybody does. Any coach would do that. Any team would do that. So I'm sure there'll be some questions to be asked after the season from the staff and the players and all that good stuff. And then, then here we go with all the transfer portal stuff, right? That's coming. I mean, I'm not breaking any big news there. It's, who's going to go to the NBA and who's transferring. And I don't know. I have no information on that. And but I'm sure every school in the country, from UCLA to Kentucky to Indiana to Georgetown, it doesn't matter. Every school is going to have to deal with that. That's just what we live in 2024.
Do you enjoy the pro game?
No, I don't. I grew up as a kid just idolizing those guys and idolizing Indiana and Louisville across the river from me. I mean, yeah, I mean NBA but that game is just a completely different game than college. And to be honest with you, high school basketball is growing closer to college, and college is turning more to the professional game. And I don't really know what the professional game is. It's the pro game to college game is, and I said it. It's like ping pong and pool. It's on the same type of table, but it's a completely different sport. Completely different sport. The substitution patterns, the hours, the quarters, the the six fouls, the refs, the style of refereeing it's done. It's just everything about it is completely different than college, and to compare them is just not. Again, we talk about nostalgia and everything. Back in the day when we were kids, you could name every player, probably in the top 20, 25 programs in the country in college. You could name the starting lineup. You could give their averages damn near. I could do the same in the pro game. Back with the Larry Bird and Dr. J and Moses Malone 76ers, like all those teams, the old Milwaukee Bucks, you got one game I think you got one game a week, one maybe on Sunday you'd watch a game. And but you had all these books and stuff, and hell, I can't name 10 players in the NBA right now. Again, the European, that's not, again, I'm not saying anything bad. It's the European. I don't grow up or daily worry about 16-year-old kids over in the European leagues that are getting ready to get drafted. I don't know any of them. So it's just kind of hard to turn on a game and try to get involved in it. Hell, I'm lucky enough to remember or know many of the college teams and their starters, let alone professional basketball. I sometimes will turn it on like to see a high ball screen and how NBA teams do it, because again, that type of basketball is obviously lives in college ranks, and it's moving more and more into the high school ranks. And hell, we never run high ball screens when I was in high school and college. And it's, again, the game's changed so much, but then the college game is just basically an NBA style game. And there's just a lot of parts of that I don't care for.
Pat, I posted a photo of you when you guys played the Russians, and I think was it your senior year in high school, I think.
I think it was.
Um, can you tell me some of the members that were on that team and what was that game like? And
So there
share
was
with
there was a
everybody.
few of them. We played them. I think it was at Assembly Hall. I think it was a lot of that Bloomington Red team. And it was, I mean, I laughed because I was like, in high school, I mean, I know Leary and Bailey and me and Albert and all of us guys, we played in the time in high school basketball where your gyms were pretty full. I mean, and Chris Lawson and Greg Graham. So, and especially when you were getting recruited and then you committed to either Purdue or IU or whoever, like everyone was coming to watch those games. And so, I mean, the biggest, maybe 4,000 or 5,000. Then we go there and it's 16,000. That thing was packed, and it was a little, yeah, it was a little breathtaking. I mean, when we came out, we were kind of like a bit startled. I think we all were, but it was fun. I mean, you learned real quickly that you were loved, and everyone it didn't care what you did in this game. Everyone you were signing, you had signed or you had committed here, and so everyone was rooting for you and all that stuff, and it was kind of neat. But as far as the Russian game, I can't even tell you what happened in the damn game. It was more of all the stuff surround or leading up to the games, what I kind of remember. And and how nuts all the fans were and all that stuff and the support that we had and all that stuff. But as far as a game was concerned, I can't even really remember what happened in it.
Pat, when you first get to Indiana University, you know those orientation and who you're rooming with and your schedule and all that. Nervous? Did you know that you'd made the right decision? Take us kind of through that process of your first year with Indiana basketball.
So, yeah, I can remember um, there was a day we all went and we sit down with our counselor and we sit down in, I believe it was in the library or someplace, and it was this big room, and you got to kind of go through and choose your classes, and they kind of helped you, guide you a little bit. And it was like Chris Loss and I were rooming together, Greg Graham and Leary was rooming together, and Reynolds and Calvert were rooming together, and we all lived in Reed, the dorm. And I can remember, I think Loss and I were like, I don't know, we were on a wing of it. And so like we were 3-0, whatever, 320. And right above us, 420, was, I believe, Calvert and Reynolds. And then 520, right above them, was Greg and Leary. Now that I could have that off, but it was just boom, boom, boom. We were right above each other or right below each other. And then Funderburk had his own deal because he kind of was late, and I guess he had an apartment of some sort or whatever. But I can remember we all went to this room, and we weren't with any other students, thank God, because we did have to have our classes done at a certain time because practice was going to be between 1:30 and 3 or whatever. And so I guess we probably did get first choice as far as early classes and all that stuff. And yeah, I mean, it was nerve-wracking because it wasn't the teachers you knew in high school and you could go ask a question before the class or whatever. I mean, it was real world. But we were all, I mean, I'm not patting us on the back and I'm not saying we were brain surgeons, but we were all pretty good kids. We were all pretty smart kids. We knew what we were doing in high school. So, it wasn't like you were walking and you needed a tutor walking to and from class. I mean, as long as we did our job and went to class, and, we were fine. But it was the number of kids I remember going to one of my first classes, and again at Floyd Central, which isn't a small school by any means, but the biggest class is with 40 kids, 30 kids, and you go to a class and there's 300 kids in there, and you're like, blown away. I mean, I was blown away. Of course, I was a Southern Indiana kid, naive to the world, and so I walk in these classes, I'm like, okay, they're going to break us up here, right? No, this is a class. I mean, it's a lecture hall. And so then I learned real quickly that may want to set up closer to the front early on. You hear all these you get from the older players, they'll tell you to do certain things, maybe to get a niche into the teacher, just in case you need some help and you're going to be missing some classes and all that stuff. But you quickly figured out which classes that you had to be at every day, every single day, because we had cards that you give the teachers got. And so if, it could be prepared for class, it could be homework turned in, whatever the case may be. It's little progress notes. And, I know a lot of professors were like, I could care less who a football player or basketball player, or that's not my job, and throws them away. But there were some teachers that used them. And so I'll never forget Dr. Grossman. It was a psychology class, and I missed a couple classes, but truthfully, and I wasn't a perfect student by any means, but I truthfully was on the road, and he did his job. He just said miss class. So I get called in over it, and I damn near got kicked off the team for it. But come to find out, I'd missed some classes because we were on the road, truthfully. So I can remember going to Dr. Grossman, and he was this German that made fun of Miller Lite and our American beers, and awesome. He great guy. And I said to him, I said, look, you really got me here. And he didn't even understand. I mean, he could have cared less what a basketball was. So I explained to him, I said, here's what happened. And he's like, oh, so I go to class. And finally, one day he looked up in the middle of class and goes, you don't have to be here every day. And I'm like, oh, but yes, I do. And he just had no idea. He had no clue about the sports coach night. You got to be in class. And it was kind of funny. I'm like, man, you screwed me and didn't even know you were screwing me. But he figured it out, and he kind of laughed about it. And so you kind of learn as those things, you learn how you have to miss class, how you have to talk to your professors and teachers and all that stuff. And sophomore year is a hell of a lot easier than your freshman year, because your freshman year, you're just running around. So I got through it, luckily.
Pat, do you recall the first time that you started for Indiana, or what was the first playing time? And when you got into the game, what were your thoughts? Do you remember who it was against, and how did you do?
First game, I don't believe I started a game my freshman year, and I don't know. I think I averaged 8.5 points a game as a freshman, but I don't believe I started a game my freshman year. I think my first game I started probably would have been my sophomore year. And that was fine. I think my freshman year, maybe even my sophomore year combined, I think they brought that up one time. Like we had, I don't know, it was like 25 different starting lineups in 2 years. I mean, there was just a number of starting lineups. And that's good and bad. That it's, if you're preparing for a team and you have no clue who's starting or who's coming off the bench or who's in the doghouse or whatever the case may be, it's hard to prepare for that. So I think it was Knight's. I think it was obviously done to motivate, no question. I think Coach Knight was good at knowing who felt more comfortable coming off the bench and new guys that felt more comfortable starting. Everybody says they want to start, but the truth of the matter, when you're playing at that level, some guys are better coming off the bench, some guys are better starting, and just the way it is. I never minded either one. In fact, I kind of like coming off the bench a little bit more. And then, the first game was Miami, Ohio, that I remember playing in and scoring and all that stuff. And the funniest part about that was Steve Wellmeyer, who was a referee, hell of a referee. He was Columbus, Indiana. They nicknamed is down here at U of down here where I live in Evansville. He's well known because he played at U of E. And when I was in high school, he did a lot of my high school games, and he was awesome. He was talkative, and he let you ask him questions and maybe even say he was a former player that understood the vocabulary that players and referees can have. And, you're not. So he was awesome. I just remember him my freshman, sophomore year. He did a lot of our games. And then bingo, he was gone. And my freshman year, we're playing Miami, Ohio. David Scott, who played at Grayson Christian, which is down near Floyd Central, but he was at Miami, Ohio. And we're playing him in Bloomington. And I remember I go in the game and there's a foul, and I'm on the free throw line. And I hear this guy say, Pat, you talked to Joe lately. And I look up, and it's the whale. He's refereeing. So in 2 years, he went from high school basketball to the Big Ten. And like, the next few years, he would be in Bloomington on a Sunday doing a game, and on Tuesday night, he'd be doing New Mexico and New Mexico State. Like, you'd see him on ESPN everywhere. And I'm just like, and you just don't do that. Referees can't move up that quickly. He was so good, though. And, he and Knight gave him a lot of hell, but the thing is, and he gave Knight a lot of hell, but they respect each other quite a bit. And he was really, really, he was one of the best referees that I ever dealt with or had ref a game. He was just awesome. He was very he was the best because he would let players talk. And if you didn't show him up, you could ask him or say anything you wanted to him. And he was just always awesome. But I just always remember that, my first game, I wouldn't have, there could have been 3 women refereeing the game. I wouldn't have known it. I was so nervous. You know what I'm saying? Like, they may have not had referees. I wouldn't have noticed. But I just remember being on the free throw line back to Miami of Ohio's bench, and I hear, "Hey, Pat, you talked to Joe lately," which is my high school coach, and I'm like, "What? What do you?" And it was like, "Oh my gosh, breathe. You can relax here a little bit." And I'm like, a referee's talking to me during it. I was like, "Calm down, get your breath. Everything's going to be fine." But I do remember that. But then I don't think I started the game my freshman year. I might be off on that. But then my sophomore year, I think I did a little bit on and off, and yeah, I mean, you quickly the nerves are gone pretty quickly. You're so worried about doing your job and staying in the moment and not messing up. I didn't really have time. You don't have time to get nervous to damn near be perfect. So you just kind of moved on quickly.
How does a basketball player work that, by the way, coming off the bench? You've been sitting for a little while, how do you mentally prepare yourself to come into a game and be at the top of your game?
As I think it's, again, and I shouldn't say this because trust me, I wasn't a defensive stopper or a playmaker and all that stuff. I was a shooter. So, a lot of people probably a lot of people would disagree with me on this. I'm just telling you how I can't tell anyone how to think. I can just tell you how I thought. Um, I never minded coming off the bench for the simple fact that, my main job was not turn it over and if you got an open shot, shoot it and be a threat. So I didn't mind coming off the bench because you could kind of see, number one, what the opposition was doing defensively. And you never think, well, when I come in, they're going to change things up. But you kind of could see what was going on, how they were guarding the other guys, or if they were doubling or whatever, or where my shot or where my advantage may be coming off the bench. And if I'm going in for this guy or this guy or this guy, because normally I never played the point and I never played the 5, but I played, the 2, 3, and 4 a lot. And so depending on the lineups we had, and you also figured out who you were going to probably guard. And so I never minded coming off the bench. I kind of liked it, but that's kind of what I was sitting there thinking about the whole time before I went in was maybe getting a little bit of an advantage there. So it never was a big deal to me.
What was it like coming out on the floor for your first game at Assembly Hall?
Well, that was my Ohio, and I
Okay.
do remember, like, that's one, like I've always said, one of the greatest feelings in the history of the world that I've ever felt was coming onto the floor as the music's playing and all that stuff, and the rush you're getting from the fans and everything. Because obviously, when you walk out on the floor, run out on the floor, um, and your coach comes out behind you, everybody goes ballistic and nuts and everything. I was even like that in high school. I can just remember in high school thinking, this is like, without ever scoring a point or doing anything good other than running and not falling down, this is one of the most awesome feelings in the world to have, people cheer for you when you come out on the floor as a group, as a team. So I can only imagine what, entertainers and at concerts feel like. It was kind of odd, but when I was in high school as a freshman, I can remember coming out to the gym at Floyd Central and the fans and everything. And so, and it's kind of neat to come out too on the road when you're getting booed and cussed and stuff thrown at you. So it's kind of a weird thing both ways, but it is an awesome feeling in a weird way without really doing anything, like I said, other than falling down. But it is a pretty awesome feeling, especially when you got 15, 16,000 people, there and they're all for you.
How close is the pregame introduction at Blue Chips close to what you guys had to endure pregame at Indiana University?
You know what's weird? So we go watch that game. I'm going to be off on this just a bit, but I think that game, I don't know. I don't know which time it was. That movie came out right when I broke my foot, or a day or two after I initially broke my foot, and we didn't know what the hell was wrong with it. So we go watch the movie. Girlfriend at the time, wife now, and some of the other guys that was still hanging around there, Pat Knight and us. And I remember going to the movie. And of course, Nova's in the movies, obviously, which was kind of neat. But the weird part about that whole movie was pretty close. It was really weird how real that was. And then how nuts this was because everybody thinks, like sports movies are not anywhere near really what happens. But actually it was kind of odd. It was pretty close. And then of course all the cheating that was going on, with the money and the cars and the tractors and all that stuff. Hell, that was legit. I mean, that was what a hell of a lot of people got in trouble for a lot of years. I mean, that stuff was, as crazy as it was, that was real. And then I'll go into this. So there were so many people in our locker room over the years. And one thing, I'm not a big autograph guy, but like, I just wish I'd have the people that came into our locker room and would speak and maybe stay a day or two with Coach Knight, Coach Dockich, and Coach Felling, those guys. And most of the time, they'd always speak to us. And then they'd watch practice a few days, catch a game, and then head out. Tony La Russa, Johnny Bench, Bo Schembechler, Jerry Lucas, just Andy Van Slyke with the Pirate. I mean, just Fuzzy Zeller. Like not odd, but not basketball people. Just Coach Knight people that he had met and he had some relationship with, and they come in and spend some time with him. Well, he always let them speak to us. But the two that were my two favorite of ever were Dwayne Lucas, the horse trainer, and Nick Nolte. And now Nick Nolte came in for about, I don't know, it could have been 3, it could have been 6, but he was there for probably close to a month prepping for this Blue Chips movie. And so I don't know if Nick Nolte knew one thing about basketball, not one. But when he came in, he would hang out, him and I don't know, the right-hand man, I don't know if that was a producer or director or something, but they would just kind of linger around. And he never got in the way. They were super nice people. But they just kind of follow, they go out on the court and they kind of walk around practice, and they kind of had carte blanche from coach and said, you can go do whatever you want. And so one of the best stories is I remember coming in for, and of course, I'm going through all my foot problems. So I always had to get there halfway early. So I remember walking into you open the doors and the training room's on your right, and then you got this long hallway. And the long hallway is probably, I don't know, 50 feet, let's say. And there's your locker room. So I normally would always go down, change, get my grays and then come back and get some treatment and get wrapped up, whatever. And I remember opening the doors and I hear Coach Knight down there just ripping someone, just absolutely going ballistic. Coach Knight was never in the locker room before practice, ever. So I thought, who the hell's down there? So I go into the training room and Garl was in there. And I said, who's he got down there? And he said, just get down there and get dressed or whatever. And I said, no, I'm not. I'll do it right here in my sweats. I'm not going down there and getting dressed. I'm not walking. What the hell are you talking about? He said, just hurry up. We got to get going. So I thought, oh, this is stupid. I'm walking into a bear's trap here. And I kind of pranced down there and tiptoe down there. And I get down there and I finally figure out it's got Coach Knight. And I walk and turn the corner and it's Nolte and this director, I guess, coach, his coach, whatever, and they're on the dry erase board, and they've got the dry erase markers, and they're throwing stuff, and he's acting out these scenes. And he said, and so he like dead stops mid sentence, like, "Hey, what's up, Pat?" And I'm like, "I don't know what you're getting paid, but they need to up the ante," because I said that was unbelievable. He's like, so now he's asking me questions on why I thought it was so. I thought it was Coach Knight. I really did. Like now again, it's down the hallway, it's echoes, but like I literally thought it was. And I just started laughing. And then I started talking to him. He's like, "No, I've never done any coaching or basketball or sports." And I kind of was like, oh my gosh. So he had basically taken over a couple weeks' time what he had seen and heard Coach Knight do and say, and the way coaches talk, and was reacting it. It was unbelievable. I thought it was Coach Knight. So I just smiled. And his last day, we beat somebody. I think we beat and I asked him if he minded getting me and Pat Knight I got it right behind me still, picture of him. And he said, I said, "Could you sign it whenever we get the picture back?" Of course, we didn't have cell phones and stuff back then. And he said, "Send it to this address and I'll sign it and send it back." And he did. And I still got it on my wall, or on my Hall of Fame back here behind me. That was a really neat one. Like he was just awesome. How he was just a super nice guy. And you knew, like, he was joking with us, telling us he was the voted People's Magazine sexiest man. It was that, I think he won it the year before. And he's like, "Look at me, look at me. This is what they consider." He was talking to the team that time. He was just really neat. And just, of course, we'd seen him in 48 Hours and, all these movies, and he's right there in front of us. And he was just a super nice guy. And then Dwayne Lucas was the other one that was just, he was around a lot, and he got his start up in coaching basketball in Wisconsin. And before he ever got into horse track or horse racing stuff, he was just those are my two favorite guys being around.
Was there any time while you were at Indiana University that you thought maybe you made the wrong decision? And
Yeah,
then,
daily,
and what?
daily, daily.
And how did you get your mindset out of that?
So, I mean, it's hard. It was really, really hard. It wasn't easy. And Coach wasn't easy. And Coach Dockich and Coach, none of them were easy. It was hard. And then you're not, should I be playing more? Should I, yeah. I mean, there was thoughts that crept in your mind all the time. Lawson and I were roommates. And, I think after, his second year, he transfers to Vanderbilt. And he and good for him. I'm not saying that was right or wrong. He chose to go. But I think, my freshman year is you're it's always in the back of your mind. But I think I remember calling my mom and dad twice my freshman year and probably venting 100%. And F this place and F him. And sure, I did it happened. But I can remember 2 times I called my dad, and of course I called dad when I knew I needed the truth said, and I called mom when I wanted a little sympathy, maybe. But I can remember calling dad and just venting. I mean, just losing my mind, throwing whatever. And I can remember there was some silence. And his next words were, "Where are you going to go?" And I'm like, "Well, I could go here. I could go here." And he's like, you really want to go there? Do you really want to do this?" And so again, you kind of walks you off the bridge from jumping here. And then you talk, and then you're like, he's like, "Do you really honestly believe that it's easier there or there or there than where you're at right now?" Well, the answer is no. It's not going to be any easier. So, but for someone to say that I never thought about it, they'd be lying. Again, back in those days. Now, I don't know how hard or how easy it is now, because it's definitely, I'm guessing it's not as hard as what Knight and Dockich and those guys made it for us. But again, I wouldn't trade it for the world now. It was really, really hard at the time. And, but it was a little bit like going to the military and, calling home and going, I can't believe we got to get up at 4 a.m. Like, we signed up for this. You knew what you were getting into going up there with Coach Knight and the program. And, I mean, hell, Season on the Brink was out. We all knew what we were getting into. So it wasn't like it smacked us in the face, but you can think you're tough, and you can think, this isn't going to bother me, or you can think that all you want until you get up there. And it's really hard. I mean, it was really tough, but again, I'd do it again in a heartbeat. But I remember, there was a writer down at Louisville Courier-Journal named Stan Sutton, and I think it was my freshman year. I know it was my freshman year, and he did a story on me, and so I did it, and I don't know why I said it. Maybe I kind of trusted people at that time, and I made mention that I thought about transferring, and he prints it. And to probably most writers, that wasn't that big of a deal. Again, if we were speaking the truth, we all would have said it. But he printed it, and Knight was not happy. And I thought, I was mad at Mr. Sutton at the time. And I'm like, dumbass, the next time you say something, make sure you say on and off the record type thing. Like, and I said it, it was like, yeah, it's been a struggle. There's been a lot of struggles, but we're not playing terrible right now, that type of thing. But that one little bit Coach Knight saw and read, or somebody showed him, and I paid dearly for it for a little bit. And I quickly learned to watch my tongue when doing an interview or anything like that from that point forward.
How easy was it to get in the doghouse, and was it easy or hard to get out with Coach
It was
Knight?
easy. It was very easy to get in it, and it was really, really hard to get out of it. I there was a few things. Coach Knight was just always labeled this defensive, blah blah blah. Oh, defense, defense, defense. I would, I'm sure people would argue with me. I found Coach Knight was much more sympathetic towards shooters and scorers than he was. Defense was very important to him, no question, but he liked offense. If you could shoot it and score it as a team, he was okay with playing that way also. And it's, those teams I was up there on, not one of us was a very good defensive player one-on-one. Greg Graham was pretty good defensively. Chris Reynolds, Jamal Meeks, they were pretty good defensively. They could have, anyway, one-on-one, team, whatever. But like me and Bailey and Leary and Eric Anderson and Calvert, and we weren't the best defensive players individually, but the team concept that we had as far as a defensive scheme and a team defense was pretty good. It was very similar to the motion offense we ran, which you could hit pause at any time and you could tell what the other four guys were going to do or should do going forward. And on offense, it was the same way. And, everybody just says motion offense now. And I'm like, that motion offense isn't the motion offense I played. Alfred, it was kind of a joke, but Alfred always said, I played a motion offense for Coach Knight for 4 years. I couldn't explain it to you. And he's that's 100% accurate. Like there's no way I could explain the motion offense that we ran when I was up there. And defense was very similar. I mean, you had your rules, you had to be in the help side, and every game was different based on the other team's strengths and weaknesses. And it was just a chess game. And so it gave guys like me, who weren't the greatest athletes in the world, a chance to play because I trusted the four guys on the floor with me. And that's just how we were able to play and maybe not be the most athletic team in the history of the world. And I've said it a lot. Like there's very few games I looked out and we're getting ready to tip the ball and think, man, we're way better than them athletically or whatever. Very rarely, but we had a pretty good record against those teams too.
Tell me about the rivalry. Tell me about there's perception and then there's reality. Because we know Purdue fans, we know Indiana fans, and we know there's a hatred. But when it comes to Indiana and Purdue basketball, what was that like for your tenure at Indiana University, and how pumped up did you have to get? There really wasn't a hate or an animosity, I'm assuming, with the players and the players of Purdue. You guys were probably friends. Am I going down the wrong road?
No, you're pretty spot on. I'm probably the wrong person to ask because, living 10 minutes or 15 minutes from University of Louisville, an hour and a half from Lexington, an hour and a half from Bloomington, I could have cared less about Purdue. Kentucky was my hatred. I mean, I hated and hell, my second choice was Kentucky, but I grew up not liking Kentucky very much. Purdue was a rivalry, but like there was no Purdue fans. I shouldn't say it. Some of my family will get upset with me, but it was Indiana and Kentucky over in New Albany, Floyd Knobs area, Jeffersonville. It was Indiana and Kentucky, and there was Purdue fans sprinkled in, and even Louisville, but Kentucky and Indiana. And we were 10, 15 minutes from Louisville. It was just a weird thing. Now down here in Evansville, you'd think 80% of this place likes Kentucky, and the rest is sprinkled in with India. It's more Kentucky down here. But I never even thought about the Purdue game growing up, other than it was a big game. Like we all knew that, right? But the Kentucky game was I always joked. I said my mom and dad has to go to work the next day if we lose to Kentucky, and they're going to have to hear about it. But if we lose to Purdue, it's no big deal. But now, if you talk to any of those teammates of mine that were from up north, it was obviously Purdue. I just guess it's like I said, to this day, I have, of course, Painter and I was the same year, and he was a good friend of mine, and still to this day I like him and root for him. But I just don't have the hatred for Purdue that most fans do, where they just lose their ever loving mind. But I'll flip this over. I mean, I've got family members that they absolutely would, if they could lose every game on the season but beat Indiana, they would accept that. And it's just, you look at them and go, well, you're as nuts as anybody. I just have never understood the hatred. Now, again, this is where I grew up. And now if I was Leary and those guys that grew up in Indianapolis, I'd probably feel much differently about Purdue, but I just don't have the hatred for Purdue that what most Indiana fans think, or what most Indiana fans do or think I should. And I'm like, well, you do you, I'll do me. But Kentucky was always the one for me, not Purdue.
How you read all this, we're going to do the perception and reality thing again, but you read all this about how Bob Knight was about you guys getting your education. How true was that?
Yeah, it was. I mean, he expected, it's always, we just always laugh with Coach Knight. And again, I'm not saying this, people don't take that I'm poking at Coach Knight, but I think he just was the guy that said, do as I say, don't do as I do.
Yes.
And so, and I think he would admit to that now, but he just expected you to, I won't say be a regular student, but like, you're going to go to class, you're going to make your grades, you're not going to be an idiot, and this is just what's expected, and for the most part, that's what happened. So it really was never a big deal to any of us, but I think from his recruiting style, I think it was a big deal. I think that's what a lot of moms and parents and dads and grandparents or whatever, they appreciated that. And he probably didn't, when he first sat down there and talked to me, I mean, it was one of the first things out of his mouth was, your son's going to be a good kid. He's going to get his education. And then we went in and talked about basketball. Well, and I've always said this, I didn't need much help being, and again, was no angel and still am not. I'm not saying I am or was, but my parents made me the person I am today. Coach Knight did not have anything to do with that. Zero. And there was a lot of guys that Coach Knight recruited that were in the same way, that feel the same way. Now, here's the point. Coach Knight recruited good kids with good parents and good families and good grades or whatever the case may be. You can say whatever you want. Coach Knight went after that kid. So when he got you halfway knew how to act and how to go to class and all that stuff. So again, that's what I always said. Like my parents made me the person I am today. It wasn't Coach Knight didn't create the man or the person I am today or the father I am today. My parents did, but I mean, he helped with it. I mean, he added to it, but I think that was a big recruiting part for him. He wasn't going to recruit, kids today. People that go out here and just recruit trash, just bad people, bad guys, bad parents. Coach Knight wasn't going to do that. But he also got to pick and choose who he recruited. I mean, if he had 10 recruits and he asked 10 to come to IU, 9 of them would say yes. And that's the way it was back then. And that's not the way it is now, with all this other stuff. So, yeah, I mean, he had a lot to do with it, but knowing how to act and everything come from my parents.
Pat, what was the difference between a regular season preparation for a game and a tournament preparation for a game?
Actually, it's weird. It's a lot easier. So, that's another kind of myth about Coach Knight, is that, you just think there were 3-hour practices from start of the season to the end of the season. And I'm not saying we didn't have some bad weeks or maybe bad, we had a loss and practice went a little longer. But I mean, I can remember the first few days, maybe 2 days or whatever, and 2.5 hours or whatever. And then, Big Ten, halfway through the regular season, before the Big Ten starts, you're saying like 5, 6, 7, 8 games, it would go to 2 hours. And then, the middle of the Big Ten, you might be down to 1 hour and 45 minutes. And then, maybe 6 games left in the season, you're down to probably an hour. And it was just whittled down. And then I can remember, of course, we were broken down now. I mean, my senior year, my foot and Bailey's side and Henderson, we were broken down. But, I mean, we were going 30 minutes preparing in the NCAA tournament and stuff. And I think he just was probably pretty good at understanding team needed some rest and, but we still got to get some stuff done and maybe walking through the other team's stuff. And so we always kind of went down. And occasionally you'd have a slip up and you might have to ramp up for a few days to a couple hours. But I remember one time in 5 years we did sprints, and it was it was my first year my third year when we got beat by UCLA, and I think we got beat by like 24, 26. First game, it was the first preseason NIT game out in, I think, Massachusetts. And they beat us by 24, 26. And then we beat them to go to the Final Four. And we beat them by 24, 26. It was a 50-point swing. We got beat out there, and Calvert played poorly, which didn't happen very often. And I think we came back and we were during practice the next day, and he just kept putting them on the line. They just kept doing sprints. And I was sitting over there on a bike going, thank God we talk about one day I'm happy I'm hurt, but that was the only time I remember doing sprints. So we never did sprints in 5 years that I can remember, after practice, 30-second drills or suicides, whatever you want to call them. But we never did that because our practices were so damn hard. You didn't have to do anything at the end of the practice to get your conditioning. So that was one thing that, I always said miss. Like Coach Knight was a lot more offense than, he's known as this defensive guru, but he was a lot more offense than he's given credit for. And then our practices were always kind of slanted down. So we weren't dead at the end of the season.
Pat, how close was Indiana University to getting that sixth banner hanging on the wall? I mean, that barrage of threes from Todd Leary. Tell us about that Final Four and how possibly we could have had that sixth banner, but don't.
I think about it all the time. Henderson's knee and my foot. And Coach Knight wanted me not – initially, Coach Knight did not want me to redshirt, and I knew that I was not going to get but probably 6 or 7 games that season. And I decided to stay back and redshirt. And I question it all the time because I think sometimes if I had been healthy, could I have helped, blah, blah, blah. And, and then Henderson's knee and all that stuff. So yeah, there's not too many times I don't think about, I think we're the best team in that year if we had been healthy with Henderson and me, but, I don't know, that was the year. And then Kansas, I think, got us the next year. But I think there was a long time. There was a lot of years that not a day. I'm not talking, once a week. I'm talking every day you thought about it. And did I do the right thing? And, staying a fifth year, should I just play that year or whatever? And yeah, that one hurts. Still does. It really does. And again, Duke was really good, obviously. And I think Michigan and Cincinnati was on the other side or whatever. And, I didn't think we had any worries about those two teams. It was just the Duke game. And, Leary goes on that barrage and Calvert's, I forget if it was his second foul in the first half and under that Valentine stuck his nose in and gave him a bad call. And there was just some things. But again, it's like I always say, we got our ass beat. So there's nothing you can say. It's not like we didn't have our chances or anything. We lost and Duke was the better team that day. But yeah, for about 10 years, I thought of it daily. Now I only think of it weekly.
Pat, besides Dwayne Lucas and Nick Nolte, what are some of the people that you got to meet that possibly you wouldn't have been able to meet if you didn't play Indiana basketball?
Oh, it's weird. It's just like I said, that's the one thing I wish I'd have done. Just, being 53 years old now and kind of to be cool, but just walked in and grabbed a game media guide, that they sold for $1 or whatever. They were always laying in there. And I just wish I'd always went over and grabbed one and had Johnny Bench sign it and Dwayne Lucas and just all the guys that come in there. Rick Majerus spent a month with us after he had his heart attack at Utah, and he never went into the coaches. He never hung with coaches. He hung in. So his locker was right next to me. And he'd work out, he'd watch practice, he'd come in, he'd get his shower before we got in there, and then he'd sit there and listen and talk to us after practice. And he didn't go in with Coach Knight after practice. He sat there with us. And it was talk about a neat, we didn't act like he was there. I mean, if we're MFing something or someone or we're mad, we did it, and he'd sit there and listen. And sometimes occasionally he'd look and go, hey, I heard what you said. If you want some advice, he was that kind of guy. So I always loved him because he didn't have to do that. And I don't know if maybe Coach Knight maybe didn't say, would you do this for me? I mean, this might help them. Who knows? I mean, there was always an angle with Coach Knight. But there was just some, Bo Schembechler and just different people that you thought, a lot of major league guys. Again, Johnny Bench was one of his good friends, and Fuzzy Zeller, just different guy. Jerry Lucas was a different. I mean, you'd think Jerry Lucas, he didn't even talk about basketball. I mean, he talked about he was a children's book writer. You're just different ways of life and thoughts of life. Dwayne Lucas was the just, he had a bucket list. He got in a horse race and he said, I put 40 things down, and, owning a Rolex and owning my own jet. There was just some wild ones, like ones we couldn't even understand at the time. And, he goes through it. He's like, I think there's 2 or 3 on there I still need to do. And, that's back when he was the absolute top of the game. And I moved to Evansville after I graduated, and I didn't even know what I was doing. We were in Evansville. There's a bunch of guys. We were going to go over to, where's he at? Where the Derby is. I live 5 minutes from there in Churchill Downs. So there was a group of guys going to get a limo, big horse racing guys over here in Evansville. You want to go? I said, I've never been to Churchill. I live 10 minutes, 5 minutes from there. I never went. I said, yeah, I'll go. This was in the summertime, whatever. So we go over there and we walk in, and I look up and see Dwayne Lucas walking. And dumbass me, I yell, Dwayne. And he turned around and stopped and looked. And this is like 2 years after I was out of college. He looked, hey, Pat, what's going on? Comes walking over. So we're talk to Coach Knight, been up there, blah, blah, blah. And I kind of look, and this crowd of people is around us, right? And I'm thinking, this isn't for me. And it was. And so, like, the guys I'm with, who they know who Dwayne Lucas is, and like Dwayne Lucas is the king of the king. We just knew him as the guy that was in our locker room all the time, was really this great horse trainer, blah, blah, blah. And so he's like, hey, you ever need my number, whatever, get a hold of Marianne BJ, which was Coach Knight's secretaries. You can call me if you ever need something. I'm like, hey, I appreciate it. I turn around, I'm like, I can't move because of all these people that had surrounded us. So my buddy looks at me and goes, Graham, I'm going to tell you one thing. Nobody calls him Dwayne. And I was like, what? He goes, that's Mr. Lucas. That is the only thing he's called. And I was like, oh, I didn't even think about it. But that's how, that guy didn't have to do that. I'll never forget that. And like I said, Nick Nolte, and like those guys and Coach Majerus, like those 3 guys they were at the top of their game when they were in our locker room. Nick Nolte was as big of a acting star as there was going, and Dwayne Lucas and Majerus. And they were the nicest guys in the world. And like I said, I call him Dwayne. He didn't take offense to it. But yeah, everybody looked at me and goes, no one calls him that here. It's Mr. Lucas. And I was like, well, duly noted.
Speaking of Marianne Davis, I am friends with Marianne Davis, who was an executive assistant to Coach Knight for years. Did you have a relationship with her? Do you have any stories about her? Great woman.
Marianne and BJ, like, so when I was being recruited, and like the first time my mom and dad walked into Coach's office and all the fishing and hunting stuff that I told about last time, like Marianne and BJ were there, and you don't quite know what they probably had to go through. I mean, they're dealing with Coach Knight and the coaches, and they weren't just secretaries. They probably had to do and deal with, they were dealing with the losing Coach Knight or the losing Coach Dockets, or the recruit, missed on a recruit. That they had to live with that coach that lost a big recruit, or whatever the case may be. So I remember going there the first time and just seeing Marianne and BJ. And then afterwards, I got to have to go up there occasionally and meet with Coach Knight or whatever, or get the phone call from one of them that Coach Knight wants to see you. Well, I can be there in a couple hours. No, I think he means right now, that type of thing. So you knew that they were their daily grind was not just fun and answering phones, let's say. I mean, they had to deal with some absolute mental breakdown things, dealing with the coaches. So their job was pretty tough. And so I had a lot of respect for them. And then when the divorce happened, I call it divorce between Indiana and Coach Knight, when that happened and he went to Texas Tech, Marianne, I believe, went with him. And then BJ stayed around. So BJ and I, we talk probably once every couple of weeks, and her children and they got kids, and so we just always kind of stayed pretty damn close ever since I left IU. And she's BJ is part of our family damn near. I'm part of hers, one of the two. I don't know if she claims me, but I'll claim her.
Pat, you're getting toward the end of your senior year. Do you see yourself playing more basketball after college? What route do you go?
I was so again, you think yes, because again, I've never done anything else other than dribble basketball since I was second grade or whatever. Mine was pretty simple. I was so beat up and banged up, and my foot was bothering me so bad, and I was getting shot up to play. And that sounds bad, but I was getting shot up to have some pain relief during games. It was either going to break or it was not going to break. It was real simple. It was a bone. It wasn't ligaments or tendons or any of this stuff. So if I could get through the pain, I could play. And so that's when we got beat by the big 5-0 at Minnesota, and I think Purdue was the next game or whatever, but I got talking about Marianne, I forget it was Marianne or BJ, but I got a phone call that Coach Knight wanted to speak to me, and I don't know how many games there were left in the regular season, but Coach Knight called me in, and it was real simple. Can you play or not? And I said, Coach, I can't. I couldn't go yesterday, and which that 50-point game is another story. You thought he would lose his mind, and I mean, we got beat by 5-0. It wasn't 48, it wasn't 49, it was 50. And the next day, I'm talking to this guy, and he's just kind of mellow, and he said, "Can you go or not?" And I said, "Coach, it's hurting so bad right now." He said, "Well, I've talked to the docs, and maybe we can give you a little pain relief, blah blah blah. But I got to know if you can go or not. Like, either you can or you can't, but I need to know now." And I'm thinking to myself, listen, I've lost 2 years of my playing career. I'm hurting bad. I've got a foot that's had 3 surgeries. I've got 2 screws up in it, 2 bone grafts. And you're asking me if I can play in 2 days. Like, really? And I thought I was a pretty tough kid. I'm like, if I could help you, I would. So basically kicks me out of his office and says, either you're in or out, and I need to know right. And I'm thinking, I was so mad. But again, mind game. So I did get shot up, started getting shot up, never practiced again. I don't think I may have practiced 5-10 minutes the rest of the season, but I just, got a little bit of a shot in the foot and took away the pain, and I got through the game, and then you just live to get to the next game. So honestly, no, I never thought about playing another game of basketball. But then Jamel Martinez and some of those guys, Pelfrey, and some of those guys from Kentucky were in Japan. And so I got a chance to go to Japan and play basketball for, I think it was like $80,000 or something. I forget exactly, but it was, at that time I was like, I don't have a job. I'm like, why not? And then it kind of fell through because of a player at University of Michigan. It was between me and him. And I guess his agent, quote unquote agent, had called and said, do you know about his foot problems? I don't even think Japan team knew who, what I did or what I looked like, other than play for Coach Knight and Coach Knight vouched for him, or whatever the case may be. I don't really know how it worked out, but I know I did have a good opportunity to go over there. And they basically said 80,000 went to 40,000. I said, I'm done playing basketball. I said, I'm not going to Japan for $40,000, and I have no desire to travel and see the world and all that stuff. I'm Southern Indiana. I'm not going to Japan just to go. So that's when the Tennessee thing started with Coach Dockich, and I thought about that a little bit, and then the drug repping business opened up, and I said, you know what, I think this sounds a lot calmer, safer, and I can get a little fishing in here and don't have to worry about basketball the rest of my life.
Pat, would you do anything differently in your career if you had the chance? Do you have any regrets?
The only regret I would have is, do I play the Final Four year and not redshirt? That one, and again, I jokingly say that, but it's true. I still to this day think about it. I don't think about it daily like I once did, but I think back, if I would definitely give, if I could have played on that team and just played in the NCAA tournament and we would have won the national championship, I'd have quit then. I wouldn't even need to play the next. No, I would have been done. I just said, cart me off, take me out of the pasture and shoot me. I'm done. But I thought it was the right thing to do, in that I just didn't want to waste a whole season on playing 4 or 5 games. But you think back and say, could I have helped us win that game? I don't know. Maybe, maybe not. But I know me and Henderson together could have been a pretty big deal. But that's probably the only thing I would change. It wouldn't be anything as far as doing something differently or going someplace else or whatever the case may be. No, I don't really have many regrets on that, from that side of things.
What do you do now, Pat?
So I went to work for Pfizer for 2 years. Actually, Steve Risley played with Isaiah in '81 with those guys when they won the national championship.
Riz, man.
You know
Very
Riz. Oh, well,
opinionated.
I forget, up there in Indianapolis area. So Risley called me. See, again, being diabetic, I had always really wanted to, like, if I ever got in the drug repping thing, I always wanted to work for Eli Lilly because they were top notch with the diabetes thing. And all the insulin and stuff that I'd ever used was Eli Lilly. And so he called me about Pfizer, and he said, hey, just do me a favor. We're going to fly you to Chicago. You go through an interview, and what's it going to hurt? And so I'm like, yeah, you know what? Whenever Lilly calls, which I had an in there with the gentleman I'd met. And I thought, yeah, before the Lilly, and I'll do this. So I fly to Chicago, and I don't know, I maybe gift a gab or whatever, but I don't know how many people was up there, but they were hiring 3 people, and one was in Evansville, Indiana, and they hired me. And I told them, I said, I need the weekend to figure out if I'm going to take it. And I didn't think there was any way they were going to hire me. This is my first interview in my life. And boom. And then I don't think they were happy, but they said, you got to Monday. I went back and I basically was begging Lilly, here's the deal. And they said, we have nothing in the state of Indiana. We've got someplace we don't even need to interview you. We're going to send you to Canton, Ohio. I go, what the hell am I going to sell in Canton, Ohio? No, I'm not going to Canton, Ohio. So that's how I ended up not doing the Lilly thing. They said, as soon as something opens up in the state of Indiana, we'll bring you back here. And I'm like, I'm not going to Canton, Ohio. So that's how I ended up in Evansville, Indiana with Pfizer, and did it for 2 years. And then I now work for a rehab company, PT, speech, progressive health rehabilitation. And I do marketing for them and still calling doctors and that stuff. And we do a lot of work for Deaconess Hospital here in Evansville. So it still is a sales job, but it still gives me an opportunity, at 3:30 to be at a practice too. So I kind of get the best of both worlds.
Who do you communicate with the most now as teammates? Coach Hinton, any of your players, any of the teammates from Indiana University, or Floyd Knobs? I mean, who texted you last, by the way?
It'd be Brian Evans and Leary, and you can only imagine that it's about Indiana and basketball. So, before Eric Anderson died, we we were pretty close, and he'd been away for so long, but you still got a chance to stay in touch with them. And I'll be the first to say we don't communicate. You get in your own worlds, right? It's when you get our age and you forget, like everyone else thinks that Indiana basketball surrounds our lives, and it does to a degree, but it doesn't. And Pat Knight and I still talk, and Leary and I and Evans and guys like that. But it's probably not, to be honest with you, it's probably not as much as it should be. And probably get off of here with you and probably send a few texts out, because it kind of makes you think sometimes. We need to reach out a little bit more in what we really do. But Ryan Carr, basketball manager, or it was basketball manager, but he works for the Pacers now. I talked to him the other day, and so you stay in touch. But it's funny. It's when you reach out, it's when something's going. It's never when it's going good. It's when it's going bad. So yeah, that's when me and Evans and Leary are always hodgepodging ideas on what's going on with the Hoosiers right now. So that's the last two.
Pat Graham, it has been a pleasure, and I am very just thank you for spending so much time with me in these 2 episodes. And this is fantastic. Maybe we'll get together for the on the 18th after the selection committee makes all the choices.
Yeah, well, like I said, I would give anything if Indiana was involved, but I don't think it's going to happen. But yeah, I can do this stuff anytime. I enjoy doing it. It's like I said, my wife knows all the stories, the Indiana stuff and the Floydsville stuff, so I don't have any nostalgia and stuff to talk to her about. So I enjoy it. I always enjoy doing stuff like this. So anytime. And if you want to reach out, I'll be more than welcome. I'm more than happy to come on and talk about that. I never mind talking about basketball.
One other question. Did you swipe your high school jersey, or did you swipe any jerseys or any memorabilia from Indiana University before you left both schools?
See, there's another thing. When at the time and moment, you don't even think about it. And I don't even know. So the answer is no. Like, I've got 4 practice jerseys from IU. But I you know what? They did give us your home jersey in a frame. Or no, they give you a home jersey. My mom and dad framed it. So I do have my home, or my white jersey from IU. I probably wish I had my Floyd Central jerseys as much as I do that one, but I never even got those. And I wish I had it. But yeah, the IU jersey I do have in a frame. But the only thing I actually stole was, I did get out with like 2 pairs of shorts and like 4 practice jerseys, reversibles. And the thing is, like, my oldest son, when he was like 8 years old, and he wasn't that big a kid, but you kind of put a pin in the thing in the side, but he put my shorts on and they actually look legit on him as an 8-year-old. Cause when we wore them, they were short shorts, right? So like, put a little clip on the side and they look normal. I'm like, oh, this is terrible. This is awful. But so yeah, that's the only thing I stole though.
It's like John Stockton. I call them nut huggers.
Yeah, exactly. That's what it was. It like, the kids that I coach now, like, they'll see a picture, or one of the other assistant with me, Brian Evans, he'll bring in a picture of me in college. And, like I said, these kids at Harrison, a lot of these kids don't know who Calvert Cheney is, let alone me. So he'll bring in a picture or a video of me in college and say, you know who this is? And then they always laugh and, crack joke about our uniforms. And I'm like, yeah, shut up. That's the way it was back in those days. We didn't have a choice.
Pat Graham, it was a pleasure. Thank you so much for spending so much time with us on the Keeping the Nostalgia Alive. We appreciate it.
Thank you, sir.
I'm trying to fix this on my end here. Let me see here. Let me stop.